Hello students, today's agenda is to check homework. We'll be working on embedded functions and you will be able to work on 5.2. Today students will be able to embed functions, and in the last lesson you will see how that applies to real life as well as the 4 basic operations. Okay, so we're putting together two functions in a different way other than the basic operations. Okay, so these are 3 functions that you're given, and what they're asking is for you to embed. It's find f of g of x. What this means is get g of x, meaning this part right here, 3x plus 1, and that is going to replace, this whole thing is going to replace your x, because before in here inside of the f of x, now you have to input this, okay, right there. So this is the easiest way to put it, is put 3x plus 1, put the one that is inside first. Again, this is g of x, and what that means is now this is going to replace the x here and the x here. So let's see if you can really see. So it says get rid of that, get rid of in the one outside, get rid of that x, and you input all of this right there. Okay, so I put it in parentheses, the one in the middle, and then what I do is look at the f, the one outside, and I just put, okay, since this is replacing x, cover that. What do I have to the left of my finger? It's a 2, and it's multiplication. So I put the 2 to the left. What do I have to the right of that x? Plus 3. So I'm going to put it to the right of this. So basically this is replacing that x. I do distributive property, and so it's 2 times 3x is 6x. 2 times 1 is 2. And then this plus 3 is not inside of the parentheses, so you're just going to bring it down. Then you combine like terms, and so you get 6x. 2 plus 3 is 5, so it's plus 5. And so f of g of x is equal to 6x plus 5. So you will see more examples. I know it's like, what? What does this mean? It's a little similar to what we saw before with the substitution in a little bit, okay, when we were working with systems of equations. Again, this, because it's inside, is going to go right there with parentheses. And then from there is just distributive property, combine like terms, simplify as much as you can. Okay, let's do another one. So number 2 is going to be h of g of x. H of g of x. Oops, I'm missing a parenthesis right there. So g of x, again, is this right here. 3x plus 1. I always start inside out. I know that there are some videos that show go from this and then take out the, I don't know, they plug in after in the second one. So that's fine also. But I always start with whatever is inside. I put it in here. I put a parenthesis around it, and then I go to my h of x, and I know that this will replace my x. So I cover that x so that I don't get confused. I cover that x with something, and then I see what's to the left, what's to the right. There is nothing to the left. It's only minus 5 to the right of that. Okay, so that's what I'm going to write in here. Minus 5. Notice I left a space in here in case there was something as a coefficient, but there is nothing. So in here, 3x plus 1, keep it the same because you don't have anything that is going to multiply. So 3x plus 1. And then bring down the negative 5. Combine like terms. It's just the constants, the ones with no variable. The 3x stays the same. These don't have variable, so that's why they are like terms. And if I have 1 but owe 5, then I owe 4. Okay, I pay with 1 and now I only owe 4. Or if you're thinking of the law of signs, a positive and a negative you subtract and leave the sign of the greater one. So 5 minus 1 is 4, greater 1 is negative, so you put negative. These are not like terms because one has a variable and the other one doesn't. So that's it. So my h of g of x is equal to 3x minus 4. Okay, let's do some more. Number 3. So you have different notation, but it means exactly the same. Log of x. This little symbol is like a tiny circle. It's the same as if we had a parenthesis in here. Okay, just like we did before, it's exactly the same. This is inside. Again, they don't, not inside because it's not parentheses, but this is, I write it first. So g of x, I put 3x plus 1. And then I go outside and it says f. So I put a parenthesis in there. Remember that this replaces the x, so I mean take away the x and put everything else the same. So the 2 is on the left and it's multiplication because you're multiplying 2 times the x. Plus 3 is addition, so you put plus 3. Okay? Remember, anytime you have a number and a variable together, nothing in the middle, it means multiplication. That's why I leave it as multiplication. Then I do distributive property. 2 times 3x is 6x. 2 times 1 is 2. And then plus 3. You're going to say, oh, it's the same exercise. Yeah, it's just to show that the notation doesn't change anything. It's just the same. Log of x is the same as f of g of x. So it's going to be 6x. 2 and 3 is 5. So log of x is equal to 6x plus 5. Okay, so the same as number 1, I believe, is just different notation, different way of writing it. Okay, so let's do g of h of x. And what would say go? Not sure. Okay, so we start with this first, h of x. H of x is x minus 5. I put a parenthesis and then I go to the outside, or in this case to the left, which is g. This is going to replace what was x before. And so what is to the left? Oh, the x is being multiplied by the 3. And what is to the right? Oh, you're adding 1. So now I do distributive property. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. Bring down the plus 1 because it's not inside of the parentheses. We don't multiply this times this. Some people do, don't. Okay, it's only times the terms inside of the parentheses. We combine like terms, so the negative 15 and the positive 1 are constant numbers. Means that they don't have a variable. And so we get 3x, negative 15 and positive 1. That's subtraction and leave the sign of the greater 1. So the greater 1 is a negative. And 15 minus 1 is 14. If you see it as money, then you owe $15, but you pay $1. And so that's going to be go of x, I guess. Okay, let's do one more, but this one is going to be something additional. Maybe I should do more than one. So now you don't have g of h of x, but now you have a number in h of 4. In h of x, you have 4 instead of the x. What this means is that you're going to have to work with that first. So h of 4 means, and I'm just going to work on the side, h of 4 is going to be equals to, means replace, if it has a 4 in here, then you're going to replace that in the x. Everything else should stay the same, okay? So it's going to be, instead of x, 4 minus 5. And so 4 take away 5 is negative 1. So h of 4 is equal to negative 1. So this is the value of h of 4. That means that this is negative 1. So now I'm going to bring this g of, instead of writing h of 4, I get its value and put it right there. And I'm going to do something similar that I did here. I'm going to go to the g function, and so it's just going to be g of negative 1. Let me get, okay, I don't have my white out here. I don't want to get you confused. So, sorry. So that h of 4 is going to be negative 1. So it's going to be g of the value of h of 4, which is negative 1, equals. Now, g of negative 1 means replace negative 1 in the x. So the 3 stays the same. The x becomes negative 1 plus 1. And so it's going to be 3 times negative 1 is negative 3 plus 1. And so negative 3 plus 1, it means you owe $3, but you pay 1, you still owe 2. Okay? So this will be, after the 2 steps, that's the final answer of g of h of 4. Okay, that's the answer. Okay, so that was number 5. Let me make up another one right now. So let's see, maybe I'll do f of g of, I'll start with a negative 3. Okay, so that means solve this first. Once you get that answer, you just put f of the answer of this and then start solving for that second part. Okay, so let's look at g of negative 3. G of negative 3, it means take away the x and in its place put negative 3, but in the function of g. Okay, so if it was 3x plus 1, now the x is negative 3. So it's going to be 3 times the value of x, which is given here, negative 3 plus 1. This is equals to 3 times negative 3 is negative 9 plus 1. You owe $9, you pay 1, that now you owe 8, so negative 8. So that's just g of negative 3. That's the value of it. Okay, so this g of negative 3 is this part. Now that value is going to go in there. Okay, instead of this, you put this value. So it's now going to be f of, instead of g of negative 3, negative 8. Now you go to the function of f, and I'm going to have to scroll up or move it up because I don't have enough space here for you to see. But you're going to get the function of f, And since we have a -8 instead of the x here, that means that that x is a -8. So the 2 stays the same. The x becomes -8. And then we have +3. And now I'm going to move it up. Now we just multiply 2 times -8 is -16, +3. And so if I have -16 and +3, remember different signs we subtract and leave the sign of the greater one. So it's going to be -13. So for the whole thing, f of g of -3 is equals to -13. Remember, it has one function, another function, but that middle function has a value instead of an x. That's when you have to do 2 different processes. And I think I'm just gonna do another one just to reinforce this. I'm actually gonna do the same one, but now I'm gonna switch. And I think I want to fold it up to here. I was gonna fold the whole thing, but I want you to see the difference between this one and this one. Okay, so I'm gonna switch it. I'm gonna put g of f of -3, so that you can see that it does make a difference if you switch them. This means start first by replacing this value in the function of f. Okay, so I get f of, instead of x, I'm going to put f of -3. And if I put -3 in this x, I'm going to put the -3 in this x. It's going to be 2 is the same. -3 is the one that we replace. +3. We multiply 2 times -3 is -6 +3. And so -6 +3 is -3. So that's for f of -3. For the second part, this is going to replace this whole thing because f of -3 is equals to that. Oh, and it just happened to be the same value. Not always, okay? This is just coincidence. Now I'm going to get the function of g. So if you look up there, is g of x is 3x plus 1. But now it's going to be g of, what is the value of f of -3? It's -3. So that -3 is going to go in there. And so the 3 stays the same. The x is -3. And then we have +1. So 3 times -3 is -9 plus 1. And -9 plus 1 is -8. So g of f of -3 is equal to -8. This is the final answer. This means after you do this process and then this process, that's the answer you're going to get, -8. Notice how, again, it's the same 2 functions combined, but one in here, g is embedded in f. In here, f is embedded in g. So you get a different answer. Okay. So I think with this, you will be able to work now on 5.2 and have fun.